Hey everybody, how is it going? Happy Friday to everyone. It is Friday, January 20th, 2023. I think I'm finally getting the year correct. We're now 20 days into the year. You need to figure it out by now. I'm just now getting there. So welcome everybody. Glad everyone could join us today. As everyone knows, or maybe I guess if you're joining, you know, kind of a little bit of description as to what this is about. But last Monday, I spoke at the Lead Generation World Conference in San Diego, California. It's a great show put on by Mike Faree. Mike has been doing this for about 3 years now, a little over 3 years. I spoke at the conference, the first conference that was in Denver, Colorado, right before the world shut down. This was back in January 2020. Had the opportunity to go back and be part of this event again with him. And the show has gotten amazing. Obviously starting out a little smaller, great crowd, great, presence, great buzz, great location, great content, great, showroom floor. Everything was awesome. Can't say enough about it. So next year you should look at going, especially those who are clients of ours who are lead buyers. Mike will offer some really good packages for people who are the lead buyers to come out and be part of that show. So be able to look out for that. I know there's one coming up in London in a couple months, and then they'll have another one maybe next year. So regardless, wanted to talk a little bit about that. And then I'm going to jump right into the presentation itself. My thought is that, for those that were able to go, I was able to share there, but there's a lot of people who weren't able to attend. I at least wanted to take a chance to get the content out, always be helping people out where I can. And we'll go from there. So I'm going to share my screen here. And one thing I'll note as well is that if you have any questions, you can put them in the comments. I'm using a live stream tool here, and it's live streamed to both LinkedIn and YouTube. And so one of the things that I'm always checking if I'm on mute. One of the things that it does is that if you post a comment on either site, it will pop up here on my live broadcast where I can see the question and be able to answer that as we go along. So I'm going to go ahead and pull in the presentation itself, and I'll tell you a little bit more about what we did at the show. So this is a couple of pictures from the show itself, me speaking. I also had a table in the walkway where you essentially had podcasting that I was doing and recording stuff. So some stuff coming out from that, interviews and stuff that I'd done. And so excited to share that as that goes along. Let me, here we go. So one of the cool things about the conference was that they had what's called the Lead Buyer Certification Program. And what it was 5 of the different sessions throughout the day on both Monday and Tuesday. You had the opportunity to go to these sessions, and you would essentially pay attention. Really, it's kind of what it was. Pay attention to what the content was. And at the end of those sessions, you could then take a quiz or a test to get Lead Buyer certified. And so really the idea is that, if you want to come in and be able to buy leads, so you're new to it, or maybe you've done it for a while and you just want to have maybe a certification of some kind to put on your resume or to show people along the way, promote it on LinkedIn, whatever it may be. This gives you the opportunity to do that. So I was the first session, lucky enough to be the first session of that Lead Buyer Certification Program on Monday afternoon, where they got to learn about what are the different survival tools needed for lead management. So, or for lead buyers, is you need lead management. You got to have it's one of the main survival tools to be able to do it. Otherwise, if you're buying leads and you're not managing them correctly, I think everyone who's listening today is going to know that obviously you're not going to be very successful. And so we have a couple of, we have our best practices, which I'll get into a little bit, but we also have, I would call our survival tools, things that will, where these lead buyers would become, call it, long lasting, be able to, fight through the challenges because they have some of these extra tools in their tool belt. So check out the Lead Buyer Certification Program. I heard really good feedback about it. People were excited about, taking that test and going from there. So I had to come up with the questions and all this stuff. And I think somewhat easy questions, but we'll get into a little bit more of what those look like here in just a moment. So one of the things I always start out with in the presentation of this kind is I like to level set to understand why do lead buyers typically struggle to survive? You may have a lead buyer who's buying leads for the sales team, and the sales team is struggling maybe with their sales or doesn't have the right system. It could be that marketing is having issues with delivering the leads or finding the right quality leads, et cetera. But one of the things that we do So we spend a lot of time working with customers, and when we start working with them, we do a lot of discovery, really deep discovery to understand their business. Everyone has a little bit different of a business, and we're really digging deep to understand what their business is. As part of that, we're doing a lot of research and reporting and those kinds of things in their system to really understand like what is actually happening. We do secret shops. We're digging in deep to understand what is the speed to lead currently, what is the current setup drive. And so as we then start to work with them, we're able to reference back to them. And so a couple of kind of key stats to go over real quick is that, you guys, a lot of people have known some of these stats. Up to 50% of the sales go to the first company that responds. We kind of know that. However, when we start working with customers, when we walk in the door, we find that only 7% or 8% of companies that we're starting to work with respond within the first 5 minutes, right? It seems pretty basic, but if you're not using the right systems the right way, you're not have the right process in place and the right tracking. Again, some of the stuff we'll talk about later will help with this stuff, but only 7% of the companies that we go start to work with. Now, after we start working with a different story, but when we start, it's the 7 to 8%. Now, it's kind of crazy too. More than half don't even respond after 5 days. Now, this one's a little, there's some that really kind of pull this crazy. There's some that respond in the first couple of days. Of course, it seems pretty basic, but you'd be surprised how many actually we put a lead in our secret shopper. We go and we look at the reporting and we understand the call was made, or better yet, we go in and we run reports in it. The status has changed. It looks like they've called them, but we go in and dig deeper, and someone maybe didn't actually place a phone call. They just kind of send them an email or send them a text and try to win that route rather than making a phone call. So there's a lot of missed opportunity as we step in and start working with companies. Now, one of the things that we know in working with customers as well is that most leads don't close right away, and that you have to continue to make more and more attempts, and that 50% of all sales are going to happen after the 5th contact attempt. However, most sales reps are giving up after 2 attempts. So obviously the math doesn't work out quite there. If 50% of the sales are happening after the 5th contact attempt and we're only calling twice, so there's a lot of opportunity when we start working with these customers to figure out what is the right strategy, how many attempts actually works for that company, where is the right kind of secret sauce as it relates to the number of attempts needed to convert a lead record. I kind of talked about this after the 5th attempt, how we don't get a response within 5 days, and what we find is that 30% of the leads typically aren't even called at all. Kind of mentioned that. We also have a lot of stuff we work with customers where they purchased a lead, they drove them to a 1003 application. They started the 1003 application, they abandoned, and then no one ever followed up with it. And so in that case, that's really where the big chunk of these never called types of stuff were not responding within five days of these leads that are out there. They went through some other avenue where maybe they didn't go straight to a loan officer or a salesperson, and it falls on the ground there. And then this is kind of a newer one. We're learning more and more about this over time, which is that 40% of customers, and I realize I'm covering some of this up. Let's move here. There we go. So 40% of customers' SMS responses aren't acknowledged by a sales rep within 1 hour. So when we send a text message back to a company and say, hey, we're interested, and you just call back, whatever it may be in our testing, 40% of the time, we don't get a response within an hour, which is really, really bad experience from a customer's perspective. Obviously, when someone is inquiring about something, they're interested kind of right now. So you gotta help them with that right away. 1 hour is way too late. So as we move on, I also like to talk about the kind of the good, badly, and ugly of the lead buyer. So everyone kind of knows like where it's really bad and where kind of our goals are. So let's kind of run through the slide pretty quickly, but speed to lead could take anywhere from 2 days to never, 0 to 1 attempts, a very low contact rate of 10%. Middle is kind of looks like this, but then our best, this is kind of the goals that we walk into clients with, is to try to get their speed to lead down to 10 seconds. Number of attempts would be 7 to 10, contact rate of 50%, and then lead conversion rate of 35 to 50%. Depends on the types of lead you're buying, where they're coming from, the sources. But ultimately, our goal is to get that conversion rate as high as possible with the best customer experience as possible. And a lot of the things above that speed to lead, number of attempts, play into that portion of it. All right, I'm going to jump right into the survival tools for lead buyers. What do they need to really be focusing on at next level things? Some of the stuff you're going to find is really tactical here in a moment. It really digs in deep in a couple of things. But that said, I really feel kind of really passionate about that. It's really impactful when companies are setting this stuff up to take them to the next level. after a speed to lead, you figure that out, or after you figure out the number of attempts, now what do you start doing from there? So in this case, we're really working with customers now to use not only lead scoring to look at lead records itself, but also look at how customers are engaging and then using that in the score as well. So in this case, we want to track when someone opens your email, when someone clicks a link in the email, and then lastly, when this is kind of a newer one that we're working on now, is trying to figure out customers who you've sent a video to and tracking who has watched, let's say, 90% or more of that video. So a lot of times you'll send out a video, someone will start it, they'll watch the first 5 seconds and bail out. If you're just looking at a click going into the video, you're going to think, oh, well, great, everyone's watching the video, but you need some software that's going to allow you to track how far they got into the process and then get the data back so you understand kind of who to prioritize or who to score differently based on who's actually engaging with your content itself. This is an example of someone that's about three customers of ours that had gone back and I looked at for the closing rates for people who have done these 3 things. The 3 things is talk about opens, clicks, and watching videos. And I looked at January 2021 all the way through September 2022. And what we found is that customers who open an email for these 3 customers had a 1.7 times more likely chance of closing because they've opened an email versus those who you're sending emails to and they don't open the email. Still going to have some close, but the idea here is that if they're opening the emails that you're sending or that you're sending emails at all, could increase your chances of closing that deal. In this case, we looked at number of clicks. In this case, someone who have received an email, or it could be a text, and they've clicked on the link in that email or text that communication, those customers had a 3.1 times higher chance of converting or closing than those who never clicked on something or maybe never got an email or a text to even click on. So those types of things are important. 3.1 times more closings. And then last but not least, this is still a little newer. We have 1 or 2 customers doing this today. We're working on a number of things as it relates to the watching video stuff. But really to understand, for those customers, the early results show about a 4.2 times higher close rate. Now, I think, in my opinion, that's going to be much higher over time, especially for those companies who really start to dig in and leverage video. And there's so much opportunity when it comes to video. It comes with sending drip marketing out, but really it could be the loan officer who gets on a call and is looking at the camera and they're walking them through the options and showing their screen and using those videos to understand like how far they got. And then you can go even further. Some of the things that I'm thinking about are things like, how do we track, was it forwarded to someone else, to a spouse or someone else to get advice, or what parts were they engaged in the conversation or in the video, and what parts did they go back to watch? How do we use that data to get it back into the lead record, to prioritize that lead appropriately, to make sure that we're following up, doing the right things? For example, if I know someone's jumping back to a certain part every time, then maybe it's a little confusing for customers at that point in time. Maybe I need to dig in a little deeper in my future videos, or maybe I need to send them something targeted towards something in particular for that part of the video they were interested in. These are all kind of the next level stuff we're working on, and I think the 4.2 is going to be much higher over time. So now that you have a lead engagement score, it's a number or a ranking system. Now that you have this score, what do you do with it, or what can you do with it? And so what we find is one of the best things to do is that you can use it for lead prioritization. And lead prioritization could kind of encompass a lot of things. It can encompass workflow, how many attempts you're going to make, how aggressively you're going to make your attempts, how aggressively you're going to send text messages or emails. Use that score to understand, really, ultimately, with stats we know, we just saw, is that there's a greater chance of converting those leads. So let's figure out a way that really works for them rather than just calling everyone the same or working that lead the same. Let's build and focus on those customers more importantly, or who are more engaged, that we're following up with them. Again, one of the things that we do a lot from time to time is that let's say that we normally make 7 attempts on a lead record, or let's say 7 attempts. And when we get to the 7th attempt, if we know there's a customer who's been really engaged with the content and all the stuff that we've been sending them, but they haven't quite pulled the trigger yet in calling us back or answering the phone or responding to a text, if we know they're engaged when we get to contact attempt 7, we have ways that we've built that essentially can allow that kind of call journey or attempt journey to continue for some more attempts based on the score of the lead at the time it hits contact attempt 7. So on the 7th attempt, if the score is low, go ahead and kick it over to the nurture campaign. We'll let our nurture campaigns do its thing. But if that score is high enough, we can build things in the system that will actually trigger to maybe place another 3 phone calls, send a couple of text messages, but to stay engaged with that person a little bit longer, because they might be on the cusp of responding and sending something into us. So that score is really important to understand what they're doing and how they're engaged versus putting everyone in one blanket prioritization structure. The other key part here is how you nurture them. So with video, right, in particular, you can use it for a lot of educational type things. And so as you're nurturing someone to maybe let's improve their credit score, rather than send emails with a bunch of text they have to read through, what if you had a video series of like the top 10 ways to improve your credit score, or something credit related that would be beneficial for them to know so that they can work on improving their credit score. And if you're sending them this content and they're engaged with it, there's a good chance they're going to call you back when it comes time to maybe try to requalify for a mortgage again once their credit score has gone up. If you're doing those things, you should also be tracking, again, what is the engagement? Who's opening these emails that have the videos and who's clicking on the links, who's going into the video, how far are they watching, who is engaged? It adds to that score, and then your strategy can change completely differently. You may not want to spend time calling your unqualified credit people from 6 months ago if they haven't looked at anything. Maybe you still do, but at least you want to prioritize the ones who have been most engaged with your content first. And this will help you do that. That way you're focusing on the highest chance of converting leads versus just, again, a blanket kind of strategy across everything. And then redistribution. This is something that is near and dear to my heart because it's one of the things that when I first launched my lead management system at NationStar Mortgage, it was the number one thing that took our conversion, almost doubled and tripled it right off the bat. As soon as we got to the point where I could take leads and potentially give them to other people or let other people have the opportunity on other leads without having to maybe reassign the lead directly to them, because some people don't want to take a bunch of leads and put in their name. It hurts their conversion rankings or their conversion stats, and some people don't like that. So using these shark tanks, or one of my favorites is a SWAT tank, which we'll get to, using these types of things, but using the score. And here's why that's important. Using the engagement score. If I'm going to follow up with a bunch of leads that were disposition is not interested 2 months ago, I want to focus on those leads who have been most engaged with content they've been receiving over time, or was initially looking at our content or looking at engaging with us in some way. Those are the opportunities I want to focus on first. And so with redistribution programs, you can usually rank order them, or maybe you set a threshold to say that the engagement score needs to be above X in order to be able to receive a Shark Tank call or a SWAT Tank call. We can do all of that with the score when it comes to these distribution programs itself. So really valuable tool there. It's a good segue right into Shark Tanks. Here we go into to call it redistribution. So kind of come back to this slide, and again, this is why Shark Tanks, this is why redistribution exists, because when distributing leads just to one person may not always be the right answer, may not be what actually works. We know that salespeople get busy. We know salespeople have sick days, and they have families, and they have vacation, and they have stuff that happens. And as a result, these are some of the results we'll find from time to time where leads aren't getting called or whatever it might be. So with a redistribution tank, I like to think of it more of like a set it and forget it. Like, I don't want to have to constantly be going in and manually reassigning leads to people. You got to look at like who should take this, who's actually in, who's going to call it. I want the system to work for itself. And this is where the redistribution programs really come into play. The first is a Shark Tank. And I'm not sure who actually coined this term, but it was early on in like 2013, where essentially it was the ability for people to go in and shark leads out of other people's names now, or at other people's queues. And so some people saw that, well, it's not really good for the culture of my company. But over time, what they found was that, it just became part of their culture and their practices. At NationStar, it was kind of, we used it for a lot of different things, not just leads, but also further down the line into applications and pre-qualifications and things that weren't just directly related to leads. But the idea was that this is not, your lead. This is the company's lead. We want what's best for the customer. We would leverage our secret shop data and show our salespeople why it is we needed a Shark Tank, because sometimes calls weren't made. We needed that to happen. So with a Shark Tank, it really is giving them the ability to see the lead, to be able to call the lead, but only take the lead if they make contact. That's the key part here. Again, I don't want to go just manually reassign a bunch of leads or in batch reassign a bunch of leads or require a manager to have to step in when they could be using their time elsewhere and coaching and working with their salespeople. I don't want them to have to do that. And so with the Shark Tank, really gives them the ability to see these leads, call them, figure out if there's an opportunity. If there's an opportunity, then they can click take lead. If no one answers, they can leave a voicemail, or maybe you have them not leave a voicemail. And as those calls are being made, it also can then also trigger all of the other automations that should be happening, maybe aren't, because your salespeople aren't working the lead the right way. Now, SWAT teams. This is one of my favorite things I've ever done when I was at NationStar. And my story with SWAT team was that we had a lot of leads that were, and we had just hired a lot of new salespeople. We had a lot of experienced people. We had a lot of newer salespeople. And me, as the guy who sat in between marketing and sales, I always struggled with, like, did we give the right lead to the right person? Did they really give the full attempt? Did they know what to say when there was an objection? Did they handle it the right way? And so, I lost a lot of sleep at night, kind of wondering and worrying about this. And so we experiment with a couple of different things where you have a manager call and have them check in and verify, et cetera. But again, a manager is so busy with other stuff, we didn't want to bog them down with these second voices. So I came up with the idea using the same logic as a Shark Tank, where I could show people opportunities, but they don't have to take it unless they make contact. And in doing so, it really allowed us to really start to maybe trust the data better. I was sleeping better at night, really, because I knew that if my SWAT team, and a SWAT team in this case for me was my top 15 salespeople. It changed every month. It had different metrics based on different things. Could be like lead conversion rate, how many attempts do they make on their lead records. Like really, my top salespeople, they closed a lot of volume, but they weren't always on the SWAT team because maybe they were closing stuff and they were just getting lucky and some stuff. I needed people who really used the system the right way and understood how to take actions and how to do things the right way. I needed those who, understood the system and understood, how to deal with sales objections, and they understood the products and all of the stuff that's involved with having a good salesperson is involved. But you also need all the other stuff for them to click the buttons right, because I needed to have the right tracking as well. So long story short, we had our SWAT team. We had 15 people. It changed month to month. Usually top 10 were stayed around the same. Some people fell off, what have you. But we gave them the ability to call leads that were dispositioned as not interested by someone who had started in the company within the last 90 days. Gave them the opportunity to go call those second voices, have an opportunity to take those if they make contact. And if they wanted to, they could go in whenever they wanted to do it. But when they talked to the customer and they actually confirmed that it was not a deal, they essentially took an action that says confirmed by SWAT. And when it was confirmed by SWAT, I now knew as a marketer that it was a legit, not interested action, and I could then use and trust the data better going forward. So it works really, really well. Again, I've talked about newer salespeople coming in. They give up way too early sometimes. They can't fight through those objections. We get that second voice, that different voice can sometimes help the customer understand their options better. And then last but not least, as I mentioned, sales, marketing, trusting data. It's one of the common problems I see with organizations today is that we have sales that doesn't trust the data that marketing has. Marketing doesn't trust that sales always is giving their best effort and doing the things they need to do. And should I trust the dispositions that are coming in as not interested, doesn't qualify? Are those legit? So it really helps kind of bridge the gap and make a better relationship between sales and marketing, because again, we're working towards the same goal. Number 3 is marketing source hierarchy. This one's a little deep into the weeds a little bit, but I think it's critical to have something like this in place to help with tracking, understanding what's working and what's not. And so going back in my days, we used, you can call them whatever you want, but the idea was essentially 4 levels of hierarchy. We had report groups, campaign source groups, and source codes. And it allowed us to really drill into however deep we wanted to go, to be able to see data, conversion data, what's working, what's not, and not just look at things at just a blanket campaign level or maybe just a filter level. It gives me some options to say I want to see things and compare things a little differently based on these 4 different groups and hierarchy. So a good example to go through is that if I have a report group, so that's my highest level, and I'm going to use an example here of, let's say, a lending tree lead. A lending tree lead Obviously, the commercials are one of the biggest out there, so we're going to use them as an example. A lending tree lead is an internet, in my example, an internet lead provider. Okay, there's other lead providers out there. There's all kinds of lead providers out there, and they all would have a report group of internet lead providers. But in this case, the associated campaign with lending tree is lending tree. That makes sense, right? So now we have our campaign. That's what most people start with today. It's just a campaign. But if you see here, I actually have one above that where I can now group all of my internet lead providers into one bucket by using a report group in my reporting. But I can also go down a further level with source group. In this case, I'm with lending tree. I have a lending tree cash out, lending tree home equity, lending tree purchase. There's different groups of lending tree leads that I'm going to buy or want to buy, and I want to be able to run reporting and see statistics or conversion data at these specific things. I want to be able to see, how do my cash out convert against my home equity? What's the differences? What's it look like? Am I converting one higher, lower, whatever? And I can dig in deeper from that point, which gives me to my source code. The source code, sometimes it's called a filter ID. You can call it really, again, what you want. In our case, it was a 6 alphanumeric character code, and it was every lead provider and their filters. So as an example, in lending tree, where I have a lending tree cash out lead, and I can drill down to the filters of FICO score in this case. So I have a cash out FICO lead between 580 and 619. I have a source code of LTCO58. If it's 620 and 659, LTCO62 and LTCO66. And that tells me when a lead comes in with one of these source codes, it tells me not only the source code itself, but what group it's in. In this case, it's cash out. I know it's lending tree, so it's campaign lending tree. It's also part of the internet lead provider. So if I want to see, okay, if cash out's converting better than home equity, then I can drill into cash out a little further down to understand now what part of cash out is converting the best. Maybe there's one specific filter that is working really well or code that's working for you, and others aren't. So you can start to leverage that and understand, okay, what do I need to buy more of or focus more on? Or maybe do I go to other lead providers and ask for these types of leads because we're converting them really well. So, part of the problem is then you get to the lead provider, and you say, hey, send me all of this data on every lead. And they're like, well, it's a lot of work. We got to figure this out. So that's where one of the things we've come up with over time is to develop a lookup table. And a lookup table platform essentially can integrate with your lead management system so that a lead provider can send us one code. Send us one code. You say, hey, for these leads that are 580 to 619 FICO score, cash out, I want you to send me a code of LTCO58. Just send me that code. All good. And the lead comes into the system, goes into the lead management system. We post out to our lookup table. We say, okay, the LTCO58 is associated with the lead lending tree cash out. It's a lending tree campaign. It's the internet leads report group. And we take that data and we append it back into the lead record so that it now can be distributed out to a salesperson. Now, this can be done before distribution, be done after distribution. Timing isn't all that important. The key thing is that the lead record itself has in its fields, they have, in this case, 4 fields. It has the source code, the source group, this campaign, the report group. And if it's in the lead record, it's part now of that lead data. And if it's part of the lead data, I can start to filter on it in my reporting natively in my lead management system. I don't need to go do a bunch of lookups and VLOOKUPs in Excel. I have it on the lead record itself. When I can start to use that in filters for distribution and prioritization and really start to dig in. If I know something's working, maybe I want to prioritize that higher, maybe I want to score it higher. Rather than just using one code and have this huge big bucket, I can just drill down into one thing, such as internet leads or lending tree. We used to run a lot of reporting. So how are we converting our internet leads today versus our direct mail leads, and go from there. And then there's even things that we've done in the past where we were making intraday kind of decisions. We were sending like FedEx envelopes out to people, and we're looking at the response rates by 3:00 p.m. to understand what's converting so far, what's having success, what's getting response rates. And then we would actually then kind of drive our strategy for the next day. And having this data in the lead record itself was critical to making it happen so that everyone had a nice little view of it without always having to pull out to Excel to do a VLOOKUP table to have it right there in the lead record itself. All right, and last but not least is our targeted lead nurturing. It is critical to our lead buyers out there that you cannot just squeeze a little bit out of the dollar of your marketing spend on the first 10 days. Really, a lot's going to come after the fact, and how you nurture and engage and score and do all the things we talked about with redistribution programs itself. That said, you need to have very granular detail as to why the customer is being nurtured so that you can be specific on the content. If you're just sending the same blast of 30, 60, 90 day with the general generic nurture stuff, it's not going to be specific to someone. It's going to be less engaging, less engagement in anything you're sending out video wise, et cetera. So you want to be focused on that particular customer's situation. Okay. Now, one thing that a lot of lenders miss, even those who are really sophisticated, they still sometimes miss, is allowing the nurture campaigns to be dynamic and understanding the customer's needs and their wants, their situation. Everything is going to change over time. It's not going to be the same thing. If someone is improving their credit score, they're not always trying to improve their credit score. They're going to eventually improve their credit score. And then maybe they need to start looking for a home. And so that nurture strategy and campaign should change and be dynamic. And there's ways to do that, whether you're sending an email to a survey or you're placing a call and updating a couple of fields so you can understand what their situation is and adjust from there. It's just such a missed opportunity to understand, again, what that kind of, we do this a lot with purchase as well. Someone who says, I'm going to buy a home in the next year. Well, if you put it in there, they're going to buy a home the next year. You need to have something that's dynamically changing that time frame for buying. Someone who said 6 months ago they're going to buy in a year, I need to know that it's 6 months now from the next time or from around the time that they said they're going to buy a home. It doesn't need to still say a year. It needs to be dynamically changing so that as I get closer to that 12 months, I start to send them more targeted information about, hey, as you get ready to prepare to go look for a home versus just the same generic 12-month nurture strategy itself. This last part, it's a little personal for me. I've talked a little bit about this on some other podcasts, but really at the end of the day, it comes down to making sure that your sales reps understand their part in this journey. I mean, end of the day, every lead matters. Mine is more of a personal story for me, myself. My father, when I was 9 years old, made the unfortunate decision to take his own life. And, unfortunate, absolutely. And, still think about it, even all of these years later, still think about it. And it still, is with me every day. However, as I look at kind of my life and what I've done and to this point in time, one of the things that's come up was this past October, I drove up to Illinois, where we were originally from, and all of his stuff was in a storage unit from all those years ago. And I decided to go and they were clearing stuff out, and I decided to go up there because I wanted to get any personal stuff I wanted to bring back, what have you. And as I started to go through the stuff, I found that there was a letter that he had written, actually a couple letters for that matter. And as I started to dig into it, I saw it was to a bank, and so I opened it up, started reading it, and come to find out my father at the time was struggling to qualify for the purchase of a home. We were in an apartment, and he was trying to get us out of an apartment after a divorce to try to move into a home. That's what he wanted, to be a homeowner, the American dream of home ownership. He wants us in a home together as a family as we move on to the next stage in our life. And he was writing a letter of explanation to the bank to say, this is my situation, and this is why it's happened, and here's what I've done. And it really gave me some details that I didn't know after all these years as to kind of what was going on in his life at the time and what have you. And so where it became really personal for me was the fact that it really started to click, because I know that lead nurturing is so important. Every lead matters. Every lead has a situation that is different from others. It's not a blanket, I'm just going to call and say not interested, move on to the next thing. Having your salespeople buy into this is critical, and they need to understand that there are stories like this out there. They need to understand that when they talk to a consumer, it's not just that they're trying to buy a house. They're trying to buy the house for a reason. There's a reason they're trying to do it. And if they don't get qualified, they should be treated in a way and nurtured in a way that can get them to that point, at some point in the future, and do it in a really good way. And again, this goes back to my time in working with salespeople along the way. And I can say this because I used to be a former salespeople, but sometimes they just take the easy way out. But it's critical they understand that they can make a big difference in someone's life. It's not just mortgage, it's education. Someone going back to school. It's insurance. Someone who needs to protect their family for certain things, or health insurance, whatever might be there. It could be debt. It could be someone who has a lot of credit card debt and can't get by every month with the payments and doesn't want to file bankruptcy, doesn't have options. And so How do you educate these people who maybe they came as a mortgage? How do we educate them on credit? How do we do these things to help change their life? And a key part of this is that salespeople are taking the time to document the situation, document with granular, detailed reasons as to why they're not interested or why they didn't qualify, and tracking that and really buying into doing it the right way. So that said, it's been a passion of mine ever since I read that letter to help our lenders understand what are their options and making sure that we can help their customers, not just today, but 6 to 12 months to 18 to 24 months down the line, that can change not only their own life, but also their family's life and their kids' lives down the road. So that said, now that we have the idea of lead nurturing, here are a lot of the kind of things that people kind of miss along the way, some detailed kind of stuff. Now, drip email, I think it's probably the most common kind of nurture thing that people think of when it comes to leads. They're going to think, well, I'll just kick them over in this bucket and we'll start lead nurturing over time. And then hopefully the customer calls us back at some point in time. But the most successful people are actually using data on the lead record and how they then go out and nurture the customer. They're looking at the time of the day the lead came in. Well, how do we use that time of the day when someone went online and submit? How do we use that time of the day 60 to 90 days later to send an email around that same time of the day? You're probably going to have a higher open rate if you're sending them not just all at 6 o'clock in the morning every day, and no one's at the bottom of the thing, versus if I'm available to talk usually around noon, my lunch break, I'm probably more likely to open my email and check my email and see what's going on there. And if you're using that data point, when the lead came in, it can be a really powerful drip email tool. And I've talked a lot about tracking opens and clicks and videos watched, and all of these things can be really important as you continue to nurture them further down the path, or more aggressively, or whatever it might be. You have so much data, or you have available data in your systems today you may not know about that can be impactful in how you nurture. Direct mail is another one of these things that I think a lot of people forget about when it comes to nurture. Some of the most successful companies we worked with use what's called a PURL, a personalized URL. And they'll use that to kind of grab the person's attention when they receive this direct mail piece. It's kind of flashy. It's kind of confusing at first. You open it up and then here you have a URL that has your name in it and has a code. And you're like, whoa, what is this? Why do I have my own website? So I'm more likely to go in and then kind of put it in and see what's going on. The PURL allows you some additional tracking where essentially you can say, okay, how many customers got to, actually went to that web page and got to the first page where we're asking them to put in a code that was on the form or whatever to verify their information. They hit submit. We can now track who hit submit. And that takes them to a lead form now, essentially where it's like, hey, are you interested in doing this? Your refinance purchase, whatever it might be. What I've seen successful to be for the PURLs is for the long-term nurture people to send that and say, hey, update your situation. Let us know what's going on. And it's a quick survey online. They go to the PURL, they type in their code, they go to the thing, they update a quick survey as to what their current situation is. And when they hit submit, that then goes back to the lead management system, updates the score, updates the strategy, updates the new nurture campaign based on the situation. And you can do that using a direct mail piece versus trying to always get them to open the same emails every time. I think direct mail is a very underutilized source. When it comes to the PURLs, we have some great partners of ours. If you're interested in the introduction, let us know and I can make that introduction for you. And they can talk about how we can integrate with the lead management system. Monitoring. So this is, again, kind of a newer thing that people have always had monitoring of credit triggers and these types of things, but they're, for example, Sales Boomerang has a great service as it relates to life events. And with life events, they're helping clients understand when certain big life events are happening for their customers, such as a divorce or such as a death in the family, or maybe it's someone graduated college, or maybe they had a baby. These are big situations, life events in someone's lives that usually trigger some type of buying activity, or selling the house activity, or going back to school, or need some type of insurance product now, or you name it. These life events are critical. And during this lead nurturing journey, you should monitor along the way. And based on the events, you then can update, again, the path. You can update what you do with it. You can update, maybe it's worth a phone call right now, or maybe you continue to nurture it, but maybe just a little bit more aggressively now that you know these certain things are happening without having to really dig deep with each customer and understand what's going on. Use the monitoring for that piece itself. Partner referrals, again, something that I used to see a lot of. I don't see as much now. Things like, let's say, a credit repair company that you work with, and referring or introducing that customer to a trusted professional who can help them with their specific situation. So if they're in a credit nurturing campaign, maybe you've sent them off to your partner who does and helps with credit repair. Well, now, I think, some people have done that, but where they've maybe missed the mark is now getting the data that they're able to. Some data you can't provide back in situations or what have you, but in some scenarios you can work it out where you can get data back or updates back on when someone might be in the market for something, again, based on maybe their credit score improved, or maybe they never signed up for it, the product, or maybe they didn't answer the call when the person reached out to them. So all these data points that get missed, to get the data back to the lead management system and adjust your campaigns yet accordingly. And last but not least is quarterly calls or check-in calls at some point. It doesn't have to be quarterly, but it needs to be on some cadence where you're calling the customer to check in. And during the check-in call, really what you're doing, one is obviously you want to talk to them, understand what's going on, what's changed, but there will typically be a survey you'd want to, it's not really even a survey, it's really just a quick couple of questions to understand what is their current situation from quarter to quarter. And again, the idea is that we want to be dynamic in how we nurture. A lot of people's situations will change over time. You need to be able to understand what that is, whether it be through a monitoring tool or whether you send them a survey through direct mail. In this case, we're actually placing phone calls or sending a text asking them to update the situation so that we can better provide them services down the road when it comes time. And at the end of the day, customers are going to see this as they really care about me, which hopefully you do. And when it comes time to go back to do that type of purchase, whatever it was, or go back to school or whatever it may be, they're going to come back to you. They're more likely to come back to you because you're taking the time to really work with them and understand their situation and help them out at the end of the day. So this is my kind of, call it my favorite lead nurturing type of things. Again, those who know me, I'm a geek about lead management stuff. And this is one of those things that I get real fired up with because there's so much green space and open opportunity and a lot of stuff that gets missed along the way. And this is where, frankly, our team can help our many organizations with how they do these things. And that said, we're at the end of the presentation. I hope those that were able to join online and looking for all the comments. And looks like we got a couple of just highs and that kind of stuff. So I appreciate everyone joining with us live. We're going to be republishing this over time so people have access to it whenever they need it. This is how you get in contact with us. Go to our website. You can call or text this number. There'll be ways to reach out to us online on our website if you need to. I also like to always recommend you listen to our podcast. I do throw out just a quick disclaimer that a lot of my friends from college say, they reach out and say, hey, I really love your podcast. We'll come to find out they love it because it helps put them to sleep at night. So that said, it's critical you do not operate heavy machinery when listening to the podcast. Make sure that you're somewhere safe and listening to it. It is again, I'm a geek about lead management, very specific lead management stuff that may not be of interest to a lot of people, but hopefully you find it interesting and check that out. We have some really cool episodes coming up here shortly. So thanks everybody for joining. Have a great day and a great weekend.